Okay, so our final demo we're going to do in the course, most likely, is I'm going to use a different database just for the fun of it. And also we're going to do the full CRUD operations, and it's a little less complicated. The Canada Summer Games, there's so many darn properties to update and so on, it's a little messy. So I thought we'd do a simpler one. And this is a nice simple database, something we're all familiar with. Who doesn't like to watch movies, right? So we have a movie entity here, we have the title, the year it's produced. Now I should maybe talk about that for a second. Notice that this is set up in a somewhat strange way, that the movie itself, the year produced, is just an nchar 4. So like 1999 or 2017, right? It's just that 4-character year, right? It's not an actual date. That's my point. Okay. Review stars is an nchar 1, so it's like 1 star, 3 stars, 5 stars. Okay, but we have a lookup here for the rating. Rating is like PG, PG-13, restricted, that kind of thing. So we have a lookup value for that. So we have a foreign key here, the integer ID of the rating, and so on and so forth. So simple one-to-many relationship, right? So the script is provided. It's been up for a little while up in Brightspace, and we do, of course, also have stored procedures prepared, right? We have some views here as well. We have the view for the movie, and then we have stored procedures for insert, delete, okay, our standard ones, as well as our select by X, right? So that's what we're going to use. I'm not going to walk through them. You're familiar with the approach, and it's the standard approach we've used to creating all of these. Okay, so let's get into Visual Studio. This time through, we're going to take a slightly different approach. I said we would show both, okay? So I'm going to have both the middle and front tier in the same solution, right? So it doesn't matter I'm going to start with the class library again. We'll start with the class library here. I'm going to put it in my work folder once more, and I will call it Simple Movie Library. Now, the solution name, I am going to change it because I'm going to end up having multiple projects in the solution. So I don't know, what makes sense to me is I'll just, oh, I have an R there, Simple Movie, a typo. I'm going to call it solution. And it'll be the solution containing both the Simple Movie Library and the Simple Movie UI projects, all in the one solution. Okay, so once more I just have the library so far inside the solution. So here's my class. I said I would do it and I didn't last time, so let me just change this to a public class lookup, right? And I'll put my properties in there. This is exactly the same as the code we did before. Okay. Now, one of the things, oh look, there's my little helper quick action. One of the things I can do is change file to lookup.cs, right? That just renames the file inside the solution over here. Now we know we want to organize code. I hadn't done it yet, so let's add my models folder. Following our standard approach here, I'll add a folder for data. So I want the lookup inside models, right? But notice that right now the namespace is just the solution namespace, or the project namespace, right? As I drag and drop it in, okay, it warns it might take a long time. That's okay. It didn't take very long. All right, but my helper is saying, wait a second, okay. Oh, move to namespace. That's not as helpful. It's funny, on my computer, it actually prompts right away, do you want to change the namespace, right? Because it should be .models. There you go. All right, I had to do it myself. Anyway, so that's in the models namespace, and now I can go on and add my other class, which is my movie class. Because I added it right inside the models folder, it already has the models namespace, right? Qualification there. Okay. So I could get this in place a number of ways, but it's not a very complex one. So I just have my ID, my summary, a title, year produced, review stars, rating ID, everything that matches pretty much the data coming from the database. Again, byte array for the row version or timestamp. Okay, so there's my two models. All right. Now, something I skipped, okay, is of course adding Dapper. At this point, I'm just going to use the console. Install package, Dapper, and there we go. I have Dapper, so I'm ready to start building my repositories. So I'll add class here. I'll start off with my lookup, my rating. And then I'm going to right away add the corresponding class. Take out the letter I. Okay. So, coming to the interface, it just has its one get lookup method. Sorry, I probably should have just brought these in because it's, maybe I'll do that for the, no, this one I'll get. Yeah, I know, there's nothing new here. We're just doing the rating repository exactly the same way. Oh, there we're missing our using for Dapper. Using the stored procedure we wrote earlier, and away we go. Okay, now exactly the same thing for athlete, but to save some time, let me just go and get it. Okay, so the main difference here now with our interface for the movie repository is we have our usual get movies, get one movie, get movies by X. Now our multiple filter here is just based on the title, the year, and the rating. Now, remember the title and the year are both just strings, right? Because the year is just a 4-character string representing the year, right? But here for the first time we actually have add, update, and delete, right? Add movie, update movie, delete movie. So we'll always pass in the movie to add, movie to update, etc., right? So when it comes to implementing this, there's going to be a bit more work involved. Again, the first part is standard approach, right? We've got our connection string comes in the constructor, get movies. Oh, it added, oh, I have using Dapper there already, yeah. Okay, so using the stored procedure, same thing here for getting the one movie. We're using that anonymous type to pass the parameter. And I'm even using the anonymous type here to pass the parameters for my get by X with multiple filters at once, right? But now, for the first time, we're going to look at, and notice, these all returned either a single movie or an INumerable collection of movies. Now we're getting to the action queries, right? Insert new movie, okay? The parameter is our movie to add, and it returns what? It returns the number of rows affected. Okay, it'll be 0 or 1 if it's succeeded or not, because we're doing one at a time. So here is the first chance I'm showing you. I prepare my integer to return. I open the connection, but I'm going to take time to define this collection of dynamic parameters, right? This gives me the chance to say the parameter direction, okay? Because remember, when we're inserting a movie, often the client wants to know what is the newly generated primary key, the ID the database has given for this new movie that we've inserted. So I'm adding the parameter here at ID, okay, but the direction is an output parameter. The others are all input parameters to match the stored procedure itself. Then when I execute, so everything else has either been query or query first or default, okay? Now we just call execute asynchronously, right? Executing what? Our movie insert stored procedure. we pass our entire collection of parameters, okay, and of course specifying that it's a command type stored procedure. After we're done though, our movie to add has been updated, okay, or we're going to update it, I should say, the ID using the parameters, okay, the parameter named add ID, which was an output parameter, right? And that way our movie to add now has been updated with the new primary key value generated by the database. Once more, all we do is in the middle tier here, okay, even though if it's in the same project or solution, we just throw the exception back up to the UI. And at the end, all we return is affected rows. Now I have a confession here. Technically, we're doing all this work to get the newly generated ID. I'm not actually using it in the user interface at this point in time, right? It's not even returned out of here. But we have the plumbing in place so that if at some point in your front-end development you do need to have access to the newly generated primary key, it's here and we can find a way to get it out. Okay? All right. So, update, very much the same. We define our dynamic parameter collection. Okay? Notice that we have the row version here as well, right? Because we're going to use that in the stored procedure to check for concurrency. Okay? We once again execute async on the movie to update stored procedure, passing our parameters, right? And we return affected rows. So if there is a concurrency error, there's no exception. It will just, the affected rows will be 0. Delete, as is usual, is pretty much the simplest one. Okay, so I'm just going to pass in another, using an anonymous type here, the ID of the movie to delete. Okay, we're getting that right from the movie object itself, and that's it. Our affected rows will be either 0 if it didn't delete it, or 1 if it did. And so in the UI, we can check the affected rows and decide what to tell the user based on that simple piece of information. Okay, and that completes, right, the actual middle layer, right? So we're done with that. So I'm just going to do a build to make sure that we don't have any build errors. No, build succeeded. Okay. So what I can do now, this is all the library inside the solution. So I can just right click, say add new project. Or I can go through file and add new project as well, right? So I can add a new project to the actual solution. Oh, well, it figured out what I meant. Okay, so blank app universal windows. Okay, and notice there's fewer options here. I can name the project, so the project will be named Simple Movie UI. Okay, and it's in the solution folder. Yep. Okay. Now, a couple things before I forget this time. Let's go into the app manifest, because we know the UI needs to have this capability to pass on the credentials of the currently logged in user to the database. So we need to enable enterprise authentication. And here as well, I can change the display name, Simple Movie. Maybe I'll get rid of the word simple. I don't need that there. It'll be my movie database. Okay, that can be the name for the application as far as the system is concerned. I should probably update the description too, but I'm not going to take time. All right, but even though these are sitting in the same solution, this doesn't yet have a reference to that middle tier. I still actually have to add a reference. So if I right click under the Simple Movie UI references and select add reference, there is a difference though, right? I can go to projects, and there is my Simple Movie library. It sees it right away because they're neighbors. They live together, right? Right in the same solution, so I can just check it off that way. In the end, it makes no difference, right? The reference is the reference. It references the DLL that it finds there, and away we go. Good. So I have the reference. One thing I'm going to need is Dapper. Now here is a situation where you definitely want to go in to the interactive manage NuGet packages for solution, right? If I go to the browse here, put in Dapper. Notice, okay, here is where I can specify, when you have multiple projects in the same solution, which ones need to have it. Now it's true they both need it, right? So you'll see here the library already has it. We can see that because it has a version and it shows installed, right? So I really just need to check this one off to also add it to this one. I could, it doesn't hurt if I even check all of them off, right? Doesn't matter. It'll see that it's already installed. If it's the same version, it just skips over it. Okay? There's no danger of messing it. But of course, I could possibly, I don't know why I would ever want to. In fact, it's probably not a good idea to have different versions in each, right? But the point is you can just install and away you go. But this is an option easily done through this interactive tool when you select Manage. There we go. So we're just going to add Dapper now to the UI, same as we have it. And now you see it even updated here, that it shows it's installed in both projects. There, good. All right, so we're done with that. So we added our authentication. We fixed the display name with our capabilities. We have Dapper, so we're ready to carry on. So some of this is going to be very repetitive. So what I'm going to do, well, I'll add, we don't need models, we don't need data, but I will add my utilities folder. Because I find Jeeves is just so useful, right? But I'm going to pause the recording while I go and get some of the standard code that I've already done elsewhere. All right, so I just went and I grabbed my copy of Jeeves. The code is exactly the same for Jeeves in this database, except for the connection string, obviously. It's a different database, Simple Movies, SP for stored procedure, right? I have the choice of whether I want to use local or .s/SQL Express. And all the other code here is the same, right? Just if you do steal it out of another project, make sure you do update the namespace for the project you're working in. Okay, the other thing I took time for is I went and got some more assets here. So I've got different images that we can use as we're working with the application as well, instead of just that stock square that's so boring and ugly. All right, so let's carry on now. Now we're ready to start working on the pages. So let me just close all tabs. And we'll start with the main page itself. Again, because we've gone through this a number of times, I'm going to pretty much just get all the code at once here. The only thing I like to do separately is the namespace for the models, okay? Again, we can reference the Simple Movie library through the DLL, right, and get to the models folder. A little bit more code this time. Well, actually, it's not that much more. It's just that I have it more vertically aligned. This is a nice formatting structure that helps you see all the properties more clearly as well. Okay, so again, I have a background for the grid with a PNG file and a nice opaque. I think I'm even going to change that down a little bit. My two rows, stack panel at the top for the title, movie database list of titles, right? Then my grid with the exact same arrangement, auto, 50 star auto. And basically, I'm replicating the exact same kind of interface we did in the last example there, right? So I have my variable size wrap grid inside of a frame. I have my combo box for the ratings. I have a text box for the title filter. And same for the year filter, because remember the year is just a 4-character representation of the year number. And then my two buttons, filter and clear, right? So this is basically the same. My list summary, that's where I'm going to set the text property in code to show how many movies we have, and so on and so forth. And this rectangle is just the vertical line across the screen. Grid view, the data template is based on the movie class, and I'm showing, okay, the summary and the movie rating. That's all I'm showing here. And that's it. Then at the bottom though, I have still my refresh button, but I've also put an add button, right? So we've just built up a little bit more to the interface from what we had in the last example. The code behind is where we're going to do more work in particular. So once more, let me just get that. All right, so here's the code behind as well. Again, I have some notes here about the variable size wrap grid that we're using. We just have count them, two repositories to instantiate here, and Jeeves once again has my connection string for me. Very much the same. I call fill dropdowns, right, to go and get the ratings. In this case, insert my all ratings option at the top. So it's very much the same approach. Jeeves will handle my database exceptions. Great, dry, don't repeat yourself approach, right? Same approach to the filter. So really, I've just replicated the same thing so far as that is concerned. What is maybe new, okay, well, we still have our filter click, our clear click, that's the same, but here, maybe I should point that out, one of the difference in the grid view, okay, right in the grid view itself, this property is item click enabled. Up to now in all our examples, it's been set to false. Now I've set it to true so that you can actually click an item in the grid view, and I've even added the item click event. Is my movie grid view item click, right? So coming back to the code behind page, movie grid view item click, okay, we actually get this item click event arg, this object here as a parameter, right? And so I can go into it, grab the clicked item, which is a movie, but it's just going to be an object, right? So I cast it as a movie, and then when I navigate, we mentioned we're going to do that, we'll navigate to a separate details page where we can bring up all the details, because we're only showing a little bit on the main page, right? Just that summary information about the movie. See all the details, we go to the details page, and this is how we get the movie there. Getting it from the item clicked, cast it as a movie, because each one is a complete movie object, right? And that way we don't have to go back to the database again to get this one movie, right? We already have it in code, or have it in memory here, so we'll just use it. So the only thing I'm missing right now is this movie detail page. But before I add that, let me point out, we also have a new button called add. So again, we're going to navigate to the detail page, but in this case, we don't have a movie yet. So that's why I new up a movie. I make my own new movie, and I'm going to take advantage of the detail page. I can use the summary to show information at the top of the page somewhere about the movie itself. So I can provide a value to the summary property here of my new movie, just saying adding a new movie. And that's a built-in way to actually have that as a clear instruction at the top of the page so the user knows what's going on, right? Okay, and refresh is the same. So we've really just added a couple more things to the same interface we did last time, but I now need my movie detail page. I could just go and get it, but I want to show you one thing. When I right-click the UI project and add a new item, you have to be very careful. I always like to show all templates because there's more than one kind of blank page, right? Make sure you select XAML first, and then I can choose blank page. XAML blank page, right? There we go. Oh, it should have given me a chance to name it. Maybe I just clicked too fast. That's what I did. Oh well. It's just as easy. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to delete it, add it again. Sometimes that's easier than renaming things. Yeah, here's where I forgot to name it down here. So it'll be my movie detail page. Now I haven't even touched it yet, but you notice if I go back to my code behind, okay, this should, as long as I spelled it right. Oh, yeah, there it goes. Okay, it sees it now. Okay. All right, so for the movie detail page, this is the final one. Yeah, I guess I'll just use copy paste rather than going and getting it. And we'll walk through it and talk about it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is let's have a closer look at this detail page. See, I have a little background going on there as well. So I have a image. I'm going to take it down to 10%. Okay, so it's fairly similar in the top we have a title panel and so on, okay? And then I'm going to have a grid here, okay, for the movie display. Now, we only have one movie, right? We're focused on the details of a single movie, so the arrangement's a little different. Basically, I'm going to have a row down here for each property of the movie is what it comes down to, okay? I've assigned a height here. You can play with the height, see what works best for you. This seems to be working okay. And then in each of these rows, I have a pair, right? There's columns, okay? I have an auto and then a star size column. So on the left then, in the first column, I usually have a text block. And then in the second column, the one immediately to the right, I'll have the data input control. So text block, text box, that same combination. By the way, a little interesting point. The order that this sits in the XAML is immaterial. It doesn't matter, okay? What defines things are the placement in these attached properties, the grid row and grid columns, right? So row 0, column 0, row 0, column 1. So that's the text box right beside the text block in that specified row and so on and so forth, okay? So the other thing to note here, this is the first time you've maybe seen it, right? This expression, bind, okay? So what we're doing, because this page is focused on an object, okay? That object is a movie. We're actually calling it, though, view. Why? Well, it's sort of an homage. Next term, you're going to be learning what's often referred to as the model MVVM, Model View View Model Design Pattern. Okay? You'll do a lot of work with it next term. And you know, the idea is that every view has a model, right? The model for this view is a movie, but we simply call it the view, right? So in code, I'll show you in a moment where we actually take the movie that was passed over and we assign it to this object we're going to call view, right? So what binding does, it says, okay, the text property of the text box, we're going to bind it. Notice this even has two-way binding to this property of this object, the view object's title property. So binding looks after, again, in the old days we used to have to write code where we would take the object that we got from the database, take this property and assign it to the text property of the XAML control that displays it on the screen. And then later on, if they added it, we take it out of the text property, assign it over back and forth. So what binding does is it removes all that manual labor, so to speak, all the code assigning this here and then back again and so on. So bind, okay, does that work for us. We just bind text to this property of this object, right? View is the object of the page. Okay, so we have the same thing here for the, pardon me, for the year. So we have it for the title, the year, okay, the number of stars, and so on. Now here's our combo box, right? This is for our drop-down to choose the rating. An observable student would look at this and right away notice a difference. All three of the earlier ones use this expression, X bind. Here I'm just saying binding. Ooh, why is there a difference here? Anyone know? You might have come across this before. All right, it's subtle, but with Xbind was added later on. Binding is what we call runtime binding. It does, at runtime, it completes the binding process. What they found is if you could do the binding earlier on, at compile time, there's some performance advantage. Plus, the developer will know about any problems earlier on than having to wait till he actually runs the application to get an error, right? So if you can, compile binding has advantages. Why am I not using it here? Well, think about a combo box. The binding here is complex because we have to bind to two separate objects because we get a collection of objects that provides the data for the drop-down, and then there's the of the values go to the object that we're binding to, right? In this case, the movie. So as I pick a new rating out of the drop-down, I'm assigning the rating ID that I've chosen to the actual property of the movie itself. So it's a complex binding situation. Next question. Is it impossible to configure things so we can use compile time binding? It's very easy if you're using the full-fledged model view model design pattern, which we aren't yet. You're going to learn that next term. There's nothing wrong with runtime binding. It just doesn't have quite all the same advantages, but it works. And in a complex situation like this, it's the way to go for us right now, right? But I just thought I'd share that with you because you know, an observant student would notice the difference and say, how come we don't use the same expression for doing the binding here? So now you know, right? Okay. Then at the bottom, underneath all that, we'll have a relative panel here with 3 buttons, one for delete, one for save, and one for cancel. And that's basically the user interface, right? Okay, now in the code behind, remember how we navigate here. We use that frame.navigate to the detail page, and we passed in a movie object as we navigated here. That comes into play. Let me kind of skip over this for the moment and come down to this on navigated to. This is what fires then after it's constructed the page, and then we finish the process of navigating here. This navigation event arg, this object, will carry that movie with us in its parameters, right? If there's only one parameter, so you go to e.parameter, well, that's the movie that we sent over to the details page. It might be a brand new movie that hasn't been saved to the database yet, if we're adding, or it's one we got from the database, right? So we make sure we take this object, cast it as a movie, and assign it to this view object, which was defined up here. The view for the page is a single movie, okay, called view, right? I could call it movie, you know, but that might be confusing because movie is a keyword in other ways, right? So it's best to avoid that unless you use a small letter M, I suppose, but it's sort of an homage to the model view model design pattern we'll get into soon, right? Okay, getting back to the constructor then, of course we prepare our repositories. I also threw in this Boolean. It's not absolutely necessary because we can always go and check the ID property of the movie, and if it's 0, we know we're inserting, right? If it's anything else, then we're updating. But as a rule of thumb, from a performance point of view, there's few things that are faster than accessing a simple variable, right? So having a Boolean like this is just more of a performance thing than anything else, but also I find it clearer in code to define my mode. Insert mode will be true if I'm inserting and false if I'm updating, okay? All right, so we use Jeeves with our connection string to get our repositories ready. I fill my drop downs, okay? So skip over this. Oh, actually, no, we should finish talking about this. We have our parameter converted to our movie, that's our view. Then here I'm setting my insert mode. So if ID is 0, I just do the task once, right? And that's more efficient than doing it over and over again. Just do it once, this comparison. And then I know that I'm inserting, so I set my insert mode to true. Otherwise, I set it to false. But here's something else I'm doing here. Would it make sense if I'm inserting a new record, a new movie, to have a delete button sitting there on the form available? No, there's nothing to delete. I haven't saved the movie yet. So my button delete, I'll set the is enabled property to false. That it'll still be there, it'll be grayed out, so to speak. I can't click on it, and that just makes sense. If I'm in insert mode, why would I want to be able to try and delete, right? So that's all happening in on navigated to. Fill drop downs, same kind of thing we've seen before. We go and we get our ratings. I'm going to insert my prompt at the top. ID is 0, select a rating. And then here I'm doing the binding, right? So that's why runtime binding is helpful here, because I can do this in code during runtime and the binding will still work. The value path is ID. The display member is the display text, okay? Item source is my ratings collection I got from my stored procedure get ratings. And then I set the selected index back to 0, because when it's finished populating it, actually it's still on the bottom one, right? So I put it back to the top with that. Then finally, everything is ready. So the page has a data context, and I set that equal to the view. Jeeves will handle any exceptions. All right, so let's get down to the nuts and bolts of actually doing the CRUD operations. Save. Save is used for both if I'm inserting or updating, right? So inside save, okay, I'm going to, now it's true, our database has got lots of smarts built into it, okay, to check that proper values are usable for the database and so on and so forth. And we could wait for feedback to come back to the database and show it to the user. Some things we have to wait. For example, if there's a violation of a unique constraint that, you know, we can't check that on the client side, we have to wait for the database to tell us that. Or we can't delete something because of a referential integrity error or something like that. Sometimes we have to wait. But if there's something we can check on the client, why not, right? We can write some code here in the user interface so we don't even bother the database. Why send it to the database just to find out it won't work if I can see that clearly up front, right? So we'll talk more about the details of how we put it together, but I'm going to have a true or false is valid, right? So I can do my own validation checks as best I can on the user interface first. And only if it passes those do I come in here and try to save it. Then I check my mode. If I'm in insert mode, okay, then I'm adding. So I'll call add movie, okay, that method of my repository. Check my records affected. If it's 0, then hey, I can show the message, could not add, and I can use the summary property because I still have the movie object, right? I couldn't add your movie that you called whatever the name was, right? And at least we've given them that feedback. If it's an update, okay, so insert mode is false, then I call update movie. Same thing, I check records affected, could not update the movie, right? Now, it wasn't a validation issue or a database issue, but we just couldn't do it. Jeeves will handle any database exceptions. So now, here's the code I wrote for is valid, right? Again, it just returns Boolean, okay, true or false. There's a number of ways to approach this kind of code, but I'm sharing you my normal approach. I like to start with an assumption. I'll assume everything is good, and then I can just one at a time test this, test that, test the other thing, and if it fails any one of them, I just set my assumption to false, right? And at the end, it doesn't matter if 10 things failed, right? It will be false. But if 10 separate things failed, why not, instead of having one message come up saying, oh, you didn't fill this in, then click again, oh, you didn't fill that in. That really is irritating to the end user, right? They hate that kind of a user interface. So instead we want to give them a list of all the problems at once. So I'll start off a string here, a message, please fix the following, okay? By the way, what does /n inside of a string here do for us?
New line.
New line, exactly, right? So I'll have a blank line underneath that heading, and then I'll be ready to list all the problems I find. So I just check each one. Notice there's no else's, it's just if this, if that, and so on. If string is null or empty of the title, valid is right away false, you must enter the title for the movie. But I still go on and I check everything else in the meantime. If the year produced is empty, you must enter the year of the movie and so on, okay? Review stars, you must enter how many review stars the movie has, right? But I can do even more, okay? I can actually check the length of review stars, okay? They entered something, but maybe they put more than one character, okay? So then I can say, no, 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 you're only allowed one. I can check the range of values, okay? So this I do a try parse, right, to make sure I get, because it could be null, right? And then I check the review stars is not a number. I can't parse it, okay? They typed in the letter Z, or Z if you're American, okay? And there you go. That's not a number, right? I can check the range. Is it less than 1 or greater than 5? So after it's passed all the other tests, I'll check the range, okay? It can only be between 1 and 5. So I can give the appropriate messages. And then finally for the rating ID, my drop-down list, if it's still at 0, I'll say, no, you must select the rating, right? That's at that top, that prompt at the top. Finally at the end, if it's not valid, then I'll ask Jeeves to show my entire message with all the feedback, okay? And then return whether true or false, whether it's valid or not. And that's it, okay, for saving, whether it's an insert or an update. Delete is simple. Deleting process is always easy, but we want to confirm, right? So here's where I'll prepare. My title is confirm delete. My message, are you sure you want to delete? Might as well take advantage of the fact that I know the name and year produced of the movie that's in the summary here. And then Jeeves will ask my confirm dialog, passing the title and the message. And remember, what we get back from a confirm dialog is a confirm content dialog result, right? Okay, and then I check it. If it's secondary, okay, then they said no, right? Otherwise, they said yes. So we're going to go in. We're going to try to delete the movie. Again, if we get a result back of 0, which is our affected rows, then we say, oops, couldn't delete the movie, and away we go. If there was an actual exception raised by the database, like we're violating a referential integrity constraint, then Jeeves will handle that and give us the message. Cancel, couldn't be much easier. Frame go back, right? So we go back to the page that sent us here. That's the main page. Any questions about all that code? Okay, just read through it on your own if you. That's a good one. I'm glad this came up. Look at that. The project simple movie library can't be started directly. One of the things about having multiple projects in the same solution. In fact, if you can look carefully, you'll see that simple movie library is in bold font, because that's the startup project. Why? Because I added it first, right? Simple movie UI is the one I want as a startup project. You can't start a library, right? I'll right click and yep, set as startup project right there. There we go. Now it's bold, and I can just click run and drum roll. Oh, I forgot to do a build, so it's doing a build. And there we go. And it started on my other screen, of course. But there we go. There's my nice Hollywood image in the background there. Here's all my 8 movies, my huge number of movies in my sample data. But you see, it's very much the same kind of interface as what we had before with our wrap grid and so on. I'll just check that things are working here for the filter. I'll just look for PG. There's 2 PG movies and so on. And title, look for an S. Oh, they both had an S. All right. Year, 19. It'll search anywhere inside those characters. Now only one matches, right? And I can clear the filter and back again. But now I can actually edit. So I can pick a movie, select it, navigate to the details page, right? Movie, Catch Me If You Can, dash. So that's my summary. It's made up of the title and the year produced. And I could edit the data now, right? So Catch Me If You Really Can. I'll click Save. And there we go. And it worked, right? Probably have to make a change there. We're running out of room. Okay. What if I take out something here? Save. There we go. You must enter the year the movie was produced. Review stars. Z. Now I get more messages, right? Oh, what am I doing here? Let's cancel. And I'll click Add Movie. If I click Save, there. It's giving me all my messages. You have to enter the movie, the year produced, select the rating, and so on and so forth, right? And of course, even this business, if I put in a 7, then I get the specific message. The review stars must be between 1 and 5. So I'm getting good feedback here, right? Cancel. Now what if I want to delete? I can press delete. Are you sure? Yes. And I deleted that movie, right? Now of course if I click no, then it just comes back to here. It just doesn't delete it. But I can cancel and go back again. Notice if I'm adding, I should have pointed that out. See the delete button at the bottom of the screen there? It's gray, right? It's not available because I'm adding a movie. Okay, well that's probably good enough for now. Show you the splash screen I have. There you go. All right, any questions about that demo? So we've succeeded now. The key points or takeaways is we've added all the other functionality for insert, update, delete by calling execute on those stored procedures. We've got 2 separate pages where we navigate to it, and both projects, okay, both tiers, so to speak, of our 3-tier are all in one single solution, right? So when you do your final project, you're welcome to do it as 2 totally separate projects, or you can combine them in a single solution. That's entirely up to you. Just hand it all in. That's all I want. Any questions? All right.